Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Sustaining Sustainability. I'm your host, CB Bhattacharya, Professor and Director of the Center for Sustainable Business at the University of Pittsburgh. This week, I'm delighted to say that I'm joined from San Francisco, California, by Danielle Jezienicki, Senior Director of Sustainability at Grove Collaborative. A certified B Corporation, Grove Collaborative creates and curates over 150 sustainable, high-performing brands. Their products are plastic neutral and carbon neutral, and the company has committed to being 100% plastic-free by 2025. With a net revenue over $300 million and nearly 500 employees, Grove Collaborative is devoted to more than just profits and has made public commitments to support a deforestation-free supply chain, remove harmful chemicals from the home, and encourage justice and equity in the workplace and beyond. In fact, they recently exceeded their goal to source an additional $250,000 worth of products and goods from Black-owned businesses through 2021 by over $100,000. Danielle, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me here today.
Delighted. So Danielle, you began working for Grove Collaborative 5 months before the start of the pandemic. How was that transition and what obstacles emerged during that time?
Sure, that's a great question, and I'm glad to start there. I think as the head of sustainability, you are often part of a small team with big goals that really require cross-functional partnership and engagement. So I'm super grateful to have had those 5 months in the office in person to build relationships and understand the company culture and most effective ways to communicate with employees across the company before we transitioned to virtual. So I would say that was really fortunate that I had that time. I'm grateful I didn't start virtually. The obstacles that emerge, I would say people were dealing with a lot in March of 2020 and sustainability wasn't at the top of that list. So teams were adjusting to being entirely virtual and remote. And it's hard to get engagement on topics that are not necessarily, kind of high on teams' priority lists when they're in, that kind of stressful crisis mode. So it was a bit of a transition, but I would say we got there. It's, a little harder to get engagement too when everything becomes more formalized versus just, informal conversations as you pass with people and so on. But, I think it's been fine. All things considered, I feel very lucky to have been able to, make this transition to virtual. Although I am a fan of being in person. I'm actually in our office right now with just a handful of colleagues, but always nice to see people.
Indeed, those valuable water cooler conversations that we missed for so long, hopefully they're back soon now. So given that you're a B Corp and doing such wonderful things, I wanted to ask, what is Grove Collaborative's purpose and how has that evolved over time?
So Grove's purpose from inception is for household essentials to be a force for good. So I would say that hasn't changed, but the ways in which we bring products to our customers that live up to that mission does evolve as new innovations are available. So as you mentioned, Grove is a B Corp. We were founded with the sole purpose of bringing sustainable products home to people, making them affordable, accessible, convenient. And a lot of our customers are in places all across the country where they might not have that access to natural products. So Grove is a place where they can, really poke around the site and discover new things and educate themselves on the certifications and so on. And so I would say that the purpose hasn't evolved over time, but what changed in 2020 was our recognition that single-use plastic could really not be part of that equation. So if we are going to consider ourselves a sustainability leader and curate a selection of products for customers meant to provide, really industry-leading standards of sustainability, single-use plastic is just simply not part of that equation. Our focus has narrowed to really be about the material impact of our business. And that's where the plastic-free goal came from. And that's where we were able to set goals around carbon reduction as well, making sure those two things are traveling hand in hand.
That's excellent. But just for the sake of our listeners, could you just explain what a B Corporation is?
Yeah, good point. So there are two different entities. There's PBC, a public benefit corporation, and that speaks to your incorporation. And then there is a certified B Corporation. Grove is both. So a PBC, public benefit corporation, means that your primary responsibility as a company is not necessarily just financial to your stakeholders, but also to prioritize social and environmental causes. The second part is a certified B Corporation. So that is a assessment, very rigorous, run by B Lab. It's meant to evaluate your social, environmental, community, kind of governance practices, really take a close look at every part of your operations and business and everything, and consider how you rank from a variety of lenses, considering all stakeholders. And so you need to get an 80 or above to be a certified B Corporation, which is a very difficult undertaking. It's a really high standard. And it means that those are businesses that have really prioritized making a positive impact.
That's excellent. So Grove has made a pledge to be 90% plastic free by 2023 and completely plastic free by 2025. First, would you delineate the difference in these two goals and rationale? And then tell us a little bit about what sort of alternative packaging, behaviors, and solutions your customers should expect.
Yeah, absolutely. The theme of this year's sustainability report, where we outline this, is progress, not perfection. And I bring that up because we get a lot of pushback on saying we can't go plastic free. We don't have a plastic free sprayer. We don't have a plastic free closure, or so on. Kind of saying we can't get to that last 20% of plastic free. And our response, and the reason we've pledged to be 90% plastic free by 2023, which is also the end of 2023, is that we recognize that by 2023, not all the solutions will be available. It's really not going to be possible to go entirely plastic free based on limitations of packaging in the industry and so on. And our goal is not to be so dogmatic about becoming plastic free that we kick a bunch of products off the website that people love and use every day and they go buy them on Amazon. That's not really success, in my opinion. So we wanted to set these incremental milestones, just recognizing the best available solutions, pushing for progress, if not perfection. And our goal of being plastic free by 2025, I think is in the spirit of the same thing. But, you see the research coming out about plastic. It's in blood, it's in human placentas. Like, plastic is so ubiquitous at this point that even like the term plastic free is becoming legally kind of tied up in what you can say and what you can't say. So I think the intention is to have no single-use plastic, to not ship our customers a bunch of stuff that they can't recycle, and ideally, kind of ship them concentrated products with very minimal packaging that can be refilled, reused, and so on. The sprayer itself is still plastic, so we are not 100% plastic free. However, you have that reusable bottle, and the way you use it is you get a small glass bottle of concentrate that goes into the bottle, and then you add water, and that's your cleaner. And so all you get on, monthly or however often you're using it is a tiny little glass bottle that can be recycled or reused or so on. And then the carbon footprint is lower. It's kind of a new model. It's a new change in behavior that I think helps customers kind of realize, okay, this is not 100% plastic free, but there is a better solution available. And so that differentiation between plastic free, 90% plastic free, 80% plastic free is a way for us to acknowledge progress and not perfection.
That's excellent. And I think that's exactly, if all of us thought about things that way, we would probably make, much better progress, much faster progress. Now, turning to the environment, Grove has set targets for scopes 1, 2, and 3 of emissions to be net zero by 2030. Can you please share with our listeners more about this science-based target approach and how you're going about it?
Sure. The way to think about carbon emissions of a company are, what is the footprint generated by all of the company's different activities, and how is it going to get less over time? Because what this science has told us is that our global emissions need to be in half by 2030. That is a massive decarbonization, unlike anything we've seen in our lifetimes, kind of in terms of the way we move products, the way we, ship, manufacture, everything really needs to change. And right now, unfortunately, on the policy side, we're not seeing that action. And Grove has been very active in advocacy and advocating for a climate bill, because it's really difficult for small companies to decarbonize without these massive changes in our infrastructure. So, for example, we ship using a commercially available transportation. So, kind of UPS boxes. Unless UPS decarbonizes by 2030, we cannot be net zero emissions by 2030, which is the goal we've set. Many companies are talking about net zero by 2050. 2030 is really where you need to see kind of intense action. So I would say to customers, like, it's great when companies have a 2030 goal. That's the last possible snooze you have on the alarm clock. In my opinion, companies really need to move faster and push harder, because we're just not seeing the change happen at scale. Scope 1, 2, and 3 are ways to categorize the different emissions in your supply chain. So for Grove, for example, we have offices, we have fulfillment centers, and then we have all the manufacturers and all the kind of raw materials. If you think of everything that goes into our products, they're made and then they're shipped to customers. And so every part of carbon emissions, they'll fall into different scopes. And the idea with scope 1 is that those are the most direct emissions. So those are the emissions generated by your company facilities and company vehicles, if you have those. But basically, did you turn the lights on in your office? Did you run the heat? So that's the emissions the most in your direct control. So if you want to bring your emissions down, this is where you have the most influence. And then when you move on to scope 2 and scope 3, they become less direct. So scope 2 is purchased electricity. And so for us, for example, we try to purchase renewable energy wherever we can, but it's not available in every location. So at that point, in order to be carbon neutral, we have to purchase what's called carbon offsets and RECs, renewable energy credits. And carbon offsets mean that we're basically paying someone to pull out a ton of carbon dioxide wherever we've emitted a ton. And we're very specific about what projects will allow. It is entirely nature-based solutions and community-led, ideally. That's really our model for carbon offsets. So we try to focus on, kind of forest preservation, habitat preservation led by, if possible, indigenous communities, supporting livelihoods, just basically keeping forests intact, which is the most effective way we have to mitigate emissions. Moving to scope 3, that's everything in the indirect emissions category. So as a company, I mentioned UPS, all the purchased goods and services, all the manufacturers that create our products, business travel, employees commuting, like all of these different categories that generate emissions, but that we as a company can't flip a switch and make them carbon neutral. So if our employees travel on commercial airlines, there's of course emissions associated with that. And there's nothing in our ability, kind of as a company to decarbonize airline travel. What you can do is influence your supply chain. Purchased goods and services are usually a company's largest category of emissions. And so that means we can go to all of our suppliers and all of our manufacturers and say, we need you in the next 8 years to convert to renewable energy and to become carbon neutral. So that really becomes, what do you stand for as a company and how do we all decarbonize as an industry to move the needle together towards this massive shift to decarbonized activities and then the changes we need to get there.
Allow me to turn to a people-oriented issue. What does it mean to be an inclusive employer?
This is a great question for us in the natural products industry, because I think our responsibility spans beyond being an employer and being, kind of thinking about our industry, because being an inclusive employer to me, I think, requires doing all the best practices I think we've learned about in terms of diverse net of recruiting and the blind, the recruiting processes where like names are off the resume and like all the things you can do to remove cognitive bias from the recruiting process and make teams look more representative. And create an office environment where every voice is heard, not just the loudest voices or the voices that have been there longer. Grove has done really excellent work in evaluating our own practices and improving there. But I think our responsibility spans beyond that in terms of thinking about our industry and who we represent on our virtual selves, so to speak. And you mentioned, CB, in the intro that we set a goal to source over $250,000 from Black-owned brands, which we've well exceeded, and increase our assortment of BIPOC-owned brands too to 15%, which also, we're on track for. And this to me speaks to the natural products industry of, we don't want to have a website full of products made by white women, purchased by white women, like that being the demographic of people you kind of typically associate with sustainable, kind of healthy home care products. We want to have a representative assortment of product that appeal to a broad variety of customers. And I think we become a better company, we become a better marketplace when we're more representative, and when the natural products industry makes space for other brands that are smaller, that have gotten less attention, but have quickly become customer favorites. We brought on, I think in 2020, Alafia. They make a lot of shea butter products. So I use the kids' bubble bath for my kids at home. And they have a really incredible story about their supply chain, the way they source shea and the way they give back to communities. They've created schools, maternal health clinics, and so on. And so, this brand is so dedicated to making an impact. So I think it just improves, just kind of generally our approach to sustainability, to bring more voices, more views into what sustainability means into the room.
That's truly fascinating. But let me ask you, what are some of the on the floor things that you have done that other companies may actually want to emulate from you to make their workforce more inclusive?
Yeah, I think another thing we did was we have a JEDI training curriculum. So that's Justice, Equity, Diversity, Inclusion. And all of our executives took that course. And I think that was just really important in kind of shifting perspectives and making it mandatory. Of course, executives are busy, but just making sure that they have time and think about this. And I think our senior leadership team really took this personally in terms of what are my blind spots, who on my team is not speaking, because maybe they don't feel heard, they don't feel like they have space and so on. And so I think making space to say, we are all doing this, so how can we collectively get better in a way that's not like shamey, but really opens the dialogue, I think, for inclusion.
Yeah. How can we empower individuals to lighten their footprint at home? Are you doing any work on that front?
So I think if you look at your habits and you look at the products you use and you think about how you're voting with your dollars and you're setting examples for your kids if you have them, just really being reflective and asking yourself, like, could I do better? Like, how could I do better? And I know individuals think my purchases doesn't make an impact, but it really collectively does. I've worked at Fortune 500 companies. Now I work at Grove. Like, the letters that people write into CEOs make it to the leadership teams. When you say there's too much packaging, or, I really would want to buy your product, but I wish it was plastic free. So that matters. Also assume that most of what's going in your recycle bin may not be getting recycled. So look at your trash too. Yeah. I think, kind of think critically about how you can do better, because your actions do matter.
As I like to say, and actually that's the title of my book, small actions, big difference, right?
Yes, perfectly said.
So fascinating conversation, but we are at the close of our time. Danielle, what call to action would you make to our listeners?
Just look up whoever your elected officials are, senators, representatives, even state senators, and ask them to pass a climate bill. Really, this is the most important thing we need to happen right now.
Let's hope that that indeed passes sooner than later. Danielle, thank you for taking some time out of your busy schedule and spending it with us today.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me, and good luck in your plastic-free journey, making a small action and big impact every day.
And before I sign off, I do want to say this podcast is made possible with the help of my colleagues, Chris Gassman, who is Senior Associate Director at the Center for Sustainable Business, Kristen P. Ahern, Center Program Manager, and Gabby Pogel, a Digital Marketing Specialist with the Center. I am your host, CB Bhattacharya, and I hope to see you in a couple of weeks for another edition of Sustaining Sustainability.